And instead of defending the reality of what's happened over the last few months and years, he's just totally making up the figures.
I think he wasn't making up the figures. He was very clear that the figures were the 12 months.
Well, the figures have gone up, so he was making
the last
them
12
up.
months compared to the previous 12 months. I think he's quite explicit about what period he was talking about. So I don't think he's making them up.
Random window of time that you're like, just
well,
you know,
to be fair,
if I lost a stone for like a few months between like February and May, and then I put all the weight on again, I couldn't say I was losing weight. Sam, you brought reinforcements.
Yeah, our very first special guest, Charlie Rowley, who I met on the 2017 election campaign when he was working for the Conservative Party, and he's also been an advisor.
Successful campaign.
Another one.
He's also been special advisor to Michael Gove.
No, thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So, Charlie, tell us, how do you? What do you think's the pitfalls ahead for the last week of the Conservative campaign?
Well, how long have we got? 7 days? Anything could go right. Because it's not been the best so far, I think it's fair to say. Lots of problems along the way, but there was a few debates that we've had. The BBC went off. And, anything can come from that.
So you think that there is, do you think they should be kind of out there on the front foot, or just keeping a low profile in the last few days?
No, definitely. I think a week to go, there really is sort of nothing to lose. You've got to throw the kitchen sink at it now. So you'd expect to see, I would hope, at least, stump speeches up and down the country. I'd expect to see, hopefully, maybe David Cameron come back, to do what he did maybe in 2015, which on the last week, it was all a bit doom and gloom in 2015 because it was about the economy, it was about austerity. And then in the very last week, he sort of, came into his own and talked about the hope and optimism for the future of the country. And I hope we can see that this time. But
that last week with David Cameron in 2015, I can remember, it was a Sunday, and we got sent to some random village hall somewhere in Somerset, and we thought, why on earth are we here? The Tories are never going to win this seat. It was Paddy Ashdown country. There was like the world's biggest Lib Dem sign outside a house, which turned out to be his. And David Cameron went to this small village hall and gave this speech where there were about like 12 activists, and in this hall he gave this speech, and in person it just appeared like he'd totally lost the plot, was just shouting, I'm worked up, I am worked up, all this stuff. And in person, you just felt, this is, you have completely lost the plot. This is totally bizarre. And then everyone watching it on TV at home were like, oh, this is the moment he's found his mojo. It's just like, it was a madman shouting in a village hall on TV. And obviously, the biggest audiences at home, it came across very well. And then the next day, he did his, I'm bloody lively, I'm pumped up speech. And he obviously did quite well in that election. So maybe we'll see that moment from Rishi Sunak this week, and suddenly the polls will turn around.
I'm Sam Lister, political editor at The Express.
I'm John Stevens, political editor at The Mirror.
And this is The Division Bell.
We'll talk about fired up. Rishi Sunak really seemed to be on one at the BBC debate.
Yeah, he'd had his Haribo, and he was definitely pumped up and ready to go. Very, very Cameron-esque style energy to that debate last night. I think it's a shame we didn't see more of this from Rishi Sunak throughout the last few weeks. He definitely was fired up, and he was taking the fight to Keir Starmer and saying, OK, fine, what are your answers to these questions? You want to be Prime Minister, you're holding me to account for my record, but what are you actually planning to do? And he really, Keir Starmer squirmed quite a lot last night.
But I think the idea that, Rishi Sunak was shouty, he was interrupty, he looked like he had passion, but I think there's a reason that the moment that we had the first big applause was from when Keir Starmer said to him, the reason that you're so out of touch is you never listen to anyone. And the audience loved that. And I think that as much as people in Westminster might say, he really looked pumped up, it was good, he was energised, we should have seen this early in the campaign, I think a lot of people at home would have just thought, why are you just shouting over everyone? You just look incredibly desperate.
Well, I think the audience, actually, there was quite a lot of applause for Rishi Sunak as well, actually. And the snap poll afterwards had them
Dead
on
heat, 50-50,
absolute dead heat.
massive. That's what Rishi Sunak needed to turn around the bar.
At least it wasn't 52-48. I mean, that number does haunt us. But I think 50-50 at this stage is actually not a bad result for Rishi Sunak. And I think where Keir Starmer really struggled was when he was asked 9 times, what are you going to do with the people who are coming to this country on small boats? What are you going to do? 9 times he did not answer. He had no answer for that.
What will Rishi Sunak do with those people? Because he says, I'll send them to Rwanda. We've had 50,000 people have come who've crossed the channel, made those dangerous journeys since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. And he says, well, my plan is to send them to Rwanda. He's not going to send 50,000 people to Rwanda. He's not going to send 5,000 people to Rwanda. It's just fraudulent to say, you don't have a plan for these 50,000 people. You're just going to let them stay when Rishi Sunak's basically going to let them stay if he stays as Prime Minister.
Rwanda is not supposed to be a place where everybody who arrives goes. It's supposed to be a deterrent.
But what's Rishi Sunak going to do with the people who've already come here? That's the question he was putting to Keir Starmer, and he doesn't have an answer to that question himself.
Yeah, but they're also planning to negotiate deals with other countries. I think there's certain talks have been in the pipeline already. Flights have been booked, apparently, for July the 24th. There is actually some action there, but Keir Starmer didn't have any answer to that. And essentially, his response to it all is to set up this new Quango, which is essentially what already exists, but slightly beefed up with a new name. It's not really the answer to the question, is it? And so I think I think that is the big dividing line, other than tax. And I think that actually Rishi Sunak did do quite well on that last night.
He did quite well at misrepresenting what's happened. He was talking about how the number of people making the crossings has gone down. It hasn't gone down at all. It may have gone down at some point last year, but now the number's going up again. We've had record numbers so far this year. And so it's bogus for the Prime Minister to stand up in a debate and instead of defending the reality of what's happened over the last few months and years, he's just totally making up the figures.
I think he wasn't making up the figures. He was very clear that the figures were the 12 months.
Well, the figures have gone up, so he was making
the last 12 months compared to the previous 12 months. I think he's quite explicit about what period he was talking about. So I don't think he's making them up.
Window of time that you're like, just
well,
if I lost a stone for like a few months between like February and May, and then I put all the weight on again, I couldn't say I was losing weight because I put weight on.
He's the only Prime Minister under which the small boats numbers have fallen at all at any point. So I think he does feel like he is actually heading in the right direction on that, and he does have the Rwanda plan. But what does Keir Starmer have? No answers. And as Rishi Sunak said, what are you going to do? Negotiate with the Ayatollahs? I mean, I think that was something that will stick in people's minds. And I think it was. I think it was a big part of that debate last night was what will you do about the small boats, because I think nobody doubts the Conservatives' desire to tackle this problem, but they
doubt their ability to do it.
But they doubt, does Keir Starmer have that desire at all? And so if you have the desire and it's difficult to do, it's going to be even more difficult if you're not actually really that bothered in the first place.
And Charlie, do you think the Tory message or Rishi Sunak's message on small boats, do you think that is convincing people who might traditionally have voted Tory in the past? Or do you still think there's a danger they might go to reform?
Well, the first thing to say is, as political debates go, I'd rather watch you two go head to head every week.
The right answer, Charlie.
Thank you. Can I come back?
Absolutely.
Help me back on.
Can use that in the promo.
Thank you. You're welcome. And, because that's a much better. I mean, last night was fine, but it was a little bit, like two A-level politics students trying to sort of, take lumps out of each other, never really sort of landing a blow. And I think some of the politics is slightly mismanaged. So, the moment where even Michelle Hussein had to step in to remind Keir Starmer, who was attacking Rishi Sunak for backing Liz Truss as a former leader, it should have been Rishi to say, well, hold on, you backed Jeremy Corbyn. But Michelle sort of was the one that sort of had to add fuel to the fire, just I think to give it a bit of spice. So as a debate, it was fine. It wasn't box office. I mean, I could have watched a rerun of the England football team, which is a bit dull at the minute, and had a better time. But most people probably could get behind that. But in terms of immigration, it is an important issue, and it is one that is going to be central to the campaign. Because if you go back to 2016, the 52-48 number that you just referencing, Sam, people voted to leave the EU because of taking back control of your money laws and your borders. And there are many communities, particularly in the north of England, particularly in those red wall seats that the Conservatives were very good at winning in 2019 under Boris. They still feel that immigration is clearly something that needs to be addressed. They feel that the Conservatives might not have done that, so that's why you've got people like Lee Anderson that have gone to Reform, why he's obviously still got a bit of a popular backing. But Reform in general and the resurgence of Nigel Farage has been so prominent during this campaign because immigration does matter. Do I think that he has the answers? No, I don't. I don't think Sir Keir Starmer has the answers. I think that was very clear last night because, again, as Sam was saying, how many
times... Do you think Rishi Sunak's got the answers?
I think he's got more answers than Sir Keir Starmer. But look, people will have a different view. How many people can you centre around it? It's not that many. Will it be a deterrent? We just don't know until it actually comes into force. Will it come into force? Well, it definitely won't under Labour because they've pledged to scrap it. So, Nigel isn't going to become Prime Minister either, so Reform won't be able to enact their policies. Sir Keir Starmer will ditch the current approach. So, the only answer that the Conservatives should be putting forward still, every hour, every second of this campaign, is to don't sort of, throw this one away. If it's an issue to you, you need to vote Conservative.
And one of the people who got quite a lot of attention, as well as the people madly shouting outside. At some point, it was difficult to listen to.
You could hear me. Could you hear me?
It sounded Jane Eyre style. Someone was locked away in a cupboard upstairs.
Wasn't it?
Just like, let me out, let me out. Just felt like, are they being dragged out somewhere? But it was the audience member, a guy called Robert, who basically said, I think you're both a bit rubbish. He said to Rishi Sunak, you were quite good you were fair as a Chancellor, you've been mediocre as a PM. And then bizarrely he said to Keir Starmer that I think your strings have been pulled by mysterious unsaid people in the Labour Party, and then said, are you two the best we've got? And then later on he was on TV and saying, well, they didn't really answer my question. And it's just like, I mean, it was quite a funny question, but what did you want them to say? Hands up, yeah, we're both a bit rubbish a week out from an election campaign.
Yeah, I thought that was quite amusing. And like you say, who are these mysterious Labour figures? Is it Lord Mandelson or is it the Corbynistas? We don't know. It could be either side.
I think it's the Corbynistas.
Well, I won't sleep until I know this.
But I did think... I thought the two things really. One, it really summed up the fact that the country is just frustrated and actually aren't really enthused by anyone. But also, it is a bit... Actually, politics is really hard. We've seen that. It's not an easy job. Putting yourself up for it, it is quite brutal. People choose to do it, so, I don't feel enormous amounts of sympathy. But actually, also, if somebody's decided to put themselves up and is going through all this daily beating, particularly as a Prime Minister, that you get, I think, we should have a little bit of respect for them putting themselves forward, even if you don't agree with what they're doing, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. Maybe I was a bit harsh on them because I suppose if you're
just going to take back everything you just said.
I'm retreating slowly but surely. Because I think, look, if you know you're going to be watched by millions of people, and these aren't celebrities, they are politicians. Okay, there is the communication, obviously, that you've got to have, which some prime ministers previously might not have been able to communicate as effectively. I don't think Sir Keir and Rishi are the best communicators. I think that's a fair point. But some of their predecessors might not have been as good as what they are. So I suppose we've got to take with what we're given. But I think, look, they're not celebrities. They are very, very detailed individuals. They like the detail. One's a former management consultant, the other one's a director of public prosecutions. Did you know that? He's the former director of public prosecutions.
Rishi Sunak used to work in his mum's pharmacist at the weekend.
I hadn't heard that one. I hadn't heard.
We've got election campaign delirium where you just hear the phrases going over and over and over in your mind, don't you? But Charlie, tell us, do you have any insight from your time on the inside about the prep for these debates, about the mood in party headquarters on the day of a big debate like this? Is everyone a bit anxious? What's the process?
Well, you very kindly introduced me as a former special advisor before, and I have to say I never felt special or gave any kind of advice really when it was sort of when I was with Michael.
Along for the ride.
Yes, yeah, always on the buses, But I think, look, with Michael Gove in particular, he's a brilliant communicator. We were talking about communication a second ago. He's someone that knows how to, land a line, that gets can say something that will definitely cut through with the public. And I think that's why he during his time was able to prepare actually prime ministers, David Cameron and Rishi and Boris and Theresa when he came back into the cabinet during prime minister's questions. So he was, I think, fundamental to that. But I think I've forgotten your questions. Sorry, I was getting lost in my sort of revealing my CV to whoever's listening there.
Gun available for hire. If anybody wants to get in touch, email us at the Division Bell and we'll put you in contact.
Cheap and easy.
No, just insights for how the mood on the day and how the process for prepping people for these things.
Yeah, it can be intense because you've got to make sure you want to land what it is that you want to say, but you also don't want to make a mistake. And you never know where the topic is going to go. You never know what you're going to get asked. And so having all of your facts are key. You can have a narrative around immigration, but if you haven't got the central facts in terms of the figures and the numbers or how you play with them in terms of what data or what data set, whether it's over a 12-month period or whether it's a month comparing this year compared to last or whatever. Waiting list is another figure that's often disputed and confused whether waiting lists are coming down or going up. But you've got to have.
I think they're going up at the moment.
Well, they will after this show, obviously. Luckily, St Thomas's, I think, is just across the road. But I think, I think you've got to have your facts. It's facts, and then you can form a narrative around that. But I just think. In the last week of this campaign, certainly for the Tories, they've got to be able to hammer home the message that, look, and I think maybe a bit of honesty, and it takes communication, it takes a bit of humbleness, if that's a word, to be able to say, look, and Rishi said it a few times, but actually to have a direct conversation with the public to say, I get it. Like, things have not been going well. As a party, we've chopped and changed leader. There's been political disarray amongst across the nation for too long. I've brought an end to that. The economy has now started to take a turn. Inflation has come down. Yes, global factors as well as sticking to the plan that he put in place. The economy is growing. We do have a plan on immigration. All things that the country want. Just do not put that at risk. You can trust me, and I might not be the best. You might have issues with me and my party. That's absolutely fine. But what you can't do is take a leap into the dark over the next 5 years because of the political uncertainty that brings, because of the threats of China, Russia, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, Iran, and the idea that you have a leader of the opposition who isn't actually that popular. There is still a lot of undecided voters out there.
We'll still be saying this after Election Day, and we'll see what the votes are, but we'll still be having this narrative. And everyone says, oh, Boris Johnson was so popular. But you look at the popularity rating of Keir Starmer at the moment, I think it's about plus 4%, which sounds quite small, but compared to Rishi Sunak, he's on about minus 20. Boris Johnson in 2019, everyone was like, oh, thumping majority, so popular. And actually, his popularity rating would have been worse than what Keir Starmer's got at the moment. So I just think at some point we have to say, fine, the Tories are doing really badly. They are very unpopular, but people aren't being forced to vote for Keir Starmer or the Labour Party. They're choosing to do that of their own free will.
I think it's quite interesting because if you actually look at how the polls translate into potential vote share, it's supposedly the lowest vote share in total for the main two parties in a long time, which means that actually people do feel disaffected and they are looking to reform or the Green Party or the Lib Dems. And so it's not as though Labour actually is rising up in terms of the total vote share, but it clearly is winning in the places it needs to win at the moment.
And we're obviously in the final days of the campaign. The leaders have been on the roads we joke about how they give basically the same speech everywhere they go, get on and off these buses and end up in random places, trying to G up supporters in areas. If you were on the battle bus, either with Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, who is just kind of must just be feeling we are absolutely exhausted, are we at the finishing line yet? How would you be G'ing them up right now?
Well, with all the Haribo and Twixes that the Prime Minister might still have spare, I think you've got to just keep going. I mean, that's all you can do, because, after, after 14 years, if you've been around that long, it could be coming to an end. And it's the final push and the final chance, effectively, to save the country from what could be a Labour supermajority that we're hearing about. So I think that should be motivation enough. to probably go to the office as opposed to a betting shop if you're in the Conservative Party, I would have thought. And just make the case time and time again, what does matter to people? It is the economy, it is immigration, it is about taxes and making sure that the fundamental values that we all hold dear, if you're a Conservative, which is low taxes, working hard, playing by the rules, doing the right thing, being rewarded by earning what keeping what you earn. A fairness of sort of getting that welfare bill down and better distribution of the nation's cash when we've gone through such a difficult time as a country, COVID, Brexit, it's not been easy. And reminding people of that, I think that nobody gets it right all the time. But the difficult decisions that this government over the 14 years have had to take, and austerity back in 2010, even under Cameron, there's a reason for that. So there's a reason why the Conservatives have had to take on all these difficult decisions and dealt with them, effectively, whether you agree with them or not. There might have been a 49-day glitch in between.
There's been more than a 49-day glitch in between. I think
14 years, 49
to say
days.
the only bad bit was Liz Truss, I think, is maybe putting a very positive spin on things.
Charlie, we met in 2017 when you were effectively a Tory bouncer to stop the press getting into mischief on the election campaign battle buses.
It's the most butch I've ever been, I think.
Tremendously butch. Now, do you have any particular highs and lows? You've done more than that campaign. Any highs and lows from your time in the Conservative Party family?
Well, aside from meeting you on that bus, Sam, obviously, and
definitely come again.
There were some. I mean, 2015 was a high, and I remember being at CCHQ that election night, and after what was 5 years of coalition, and where actually David Cameron wasn't expected to win. The polls were pointing towards Ed Miliband coming in because people didn't necessarily, according to the polls, like austerity, or they felt that it's the same old Tories that had to make difficult decisions, and they just wanted Ed Miliband. And then when you fight that campaign, and then you actually see, you've got a majority. The hard work pays off. So that was a particular highlight. I mean, I think on the buses in general, they're strange places because everybody knows on the bus when something's gone wrong. And I always get that thing, so if you were, as I was the press officer, and you know that the visit that you're all driving up the A1 to, is about to be cancelled because, I don't know, there's a protest or the Prime Minister's running behind and therefore we're going to have to skip that bit. And you've got, a bus full of sort of, deputy political editors to have to explain. I know we got up incredibly early this morning. We had a lovely breakfast at Premier Inn. And we've driven for 4.5 hours. I'm afraid we're going to be turning back. I mean, it's not a message people like. Can you believe that? And so being able
I can.
So being divas like Sam Lister in the back, kicking off.
Exactly. And then you see all of a sudden, people sort of furiously get their laptops out and start sort of, you think, because you still want to be, you still want there to be a positive reflection and spin on the day's events. But managing things like that when things go wrong. But obviously when they go right, I think they're quite fun days because you're on and off the bus the whole time. You're with the Prime Minister or whoever it is, senior cabinet minister, in meeting the public, doing whatever they're doing. I'm absolutely sure, I'm convinced that no one within the Conservative Party would let any political figure anywhere near a wetsuit or anything like that. Thank God, I know. So, but you do see some fun things on the campaign. You see some fun things on the buses just to keep things in. But they are quite an ordeal.
Yeah, they are. I definitely feel scarred by my time on my two battle buses, Ed Miliband and Theresa May. So.
But it's vice versa as well. So I mean, we as the sort of the Tory, obviously, bouncers, could sense when something also had gone wrong because you would just see sort of everyone on the bus start to sort of whisper amongst themselves that they'd heard. Given that you're sort of on our bus, the power of balance sort of shifts. I know it's a bizarre thing, when you are the Tory campaign, you should be in control of what people want to see and what we're going to do and all the rest of it. But then when all of a sudden, I don't know, a recording comes out that a Tory backbench MP has said that could blow the wheels off the bus and the campaign, and you all of a sudden feel on the bus that, we're a prisoner within our own home, or we can't control this because everyone's writing on our bus about how bad something has just gone that we are ultimately going to have to tidy up. And then, of course, you get question after question about, have you heard about this candidate, that candidate, what that person is? You've got absolutely no idea. No idea. Have another Twix. Yeah. Have another coffee.
There's a secret stash of wine here.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So it's a game in itself, but a good experience. No,
it's an endurance test, a test of stamina, and a test of sanity.
Yes, yeah.
I lost mine by the end of it.
Yes, I'm not sure we passed it.
No, I don't think so. Not at
but we
all.
survived.
We survived, and that's the main thing. Charlie, as we've discussed, you used to work for Michael Gove, and housing is a really big issue at this election. Do you think either party can deliver on their pledges?
I think it's going to be difficult. I think planning is such a complicated issue, and because it doesn't just involve national policy. So, even if there is a super majority that we keep hearing about, and you would think maybe with such a big majority that a government can push through the most difficult challenges first, and planning is one of them. That's on a national level, but you've got to then get the approvals of planning applications by your local councils. So getting them to come on board, and we know sometimes actually, local opinion is divided when a new development springs up, or if there's a planning application. Sometimes, on occasion, it has been known. On occasion, local opposition does occur when all of a sudden you've got a new development next door. So it will be difficult, but I think it could be done if the parliamentary, arithmetic is on your side. But I think in terms of the numbers, I mean, look, a million homes by the end of this parliament is something that Conservatives sort of pledged to do, and I think they've achieved that. The ongoing sort of 300,000 a year is always disputed, and whether it's met or not, I'm sure it can be. I mean, Labour are pledging, I think, 1.5 million, so talking about 500,000 extra. It's not that much. And I say that because in the grand scheme of things, 300,000 homes a year is a drop in the ocean in comparison to what you actually need.
To the size of the country.
So I think it's going to be difficult. But I think, it can be done. But I think everybody's just got to have a very open and honest conversation about the types of homes. And, if you need to build quickly, there is nothing wrong with building more flats. And, but there will always be then a conversation about the kind of property and, the dimensions. And you've got to have, high living standards. Of course you do. But actually, if you want to live in a city, and if it's packed and crowded, but you just want to live there, then actually there might need to be a bit of give or take about the kind of property and the tenure. They're not all going to be lovely sort of new builds, even though we want to see them. We want to see beautiful homes right across the country and fit for the future and that are energy efficient and all the rest of it to keep sort of, bills low. But you've just got to have an honest conversation, because there's a generation of people, it feels to me now, young people in particular, that just don't have the opportunity to get on the housing ladder, because the homes, and whether they're houses or flats, they're just not there, and they're not affordable.
And Labour have said that the way they're going to pay for public services and increases in spending on the NHS or schools, whatever, won't be raising taxes. It will be growing the economy, and the way they're going to grow the economy is getting the country building. So obviously they're going to need to get on with that quite quickly if they're going to raise any money within the first 5 years that they're in power. If you were Angela Rayner, what are things that she could do very quickly to try and make a difference?
Well, I'm sorry, just thinking about if I was Angela Rayner for a second, I don't think that's.
I
know.
What was throwing you for a minute? I was like,
well, if I was Angela Rayner, I would have released my tax advice that I'd had on capital gains and all the rest, and would have got that debacle. Would have let that hang around the Labour Party's neck for as long as it did. I would have been open with the public about that from the off, even though she's been, I think, cleared by the police now. But HMRC, I think, is still.
I think they are. I think that everyone's dropped it. But if you were Angela Rayner in her
moved on there, didn't you? Quickly moved on there.
That's the fact. That's the fact. But back to the question: if you were Angela Rayner, what would you do about housing in general?
Well, build.
Yeah.
You'd have to. You've got to. But you've got to obviously then say to your. If it is going to be, again, just working on premise, if it's a super, Tory, super Tory majority, I was about to say that, wishful thinking.
Massive shock when the exit poll drops.
Yes, exactly. You heard it here first.
Get a bet on it.
Yes, yeah. I think like, she would be telling her, I would have thought, her parliamentary candidates, or within the Labour Party, and if they become MPs, that look, right, okay, yep, you've done well, but you've won on the back of a country that is fed up of the Tories that weren't able to grapple with this issue. Don't be a NIMBY. You'd be saying, look, we're going to push through some really dramatic reforms now to get the homes that we need in this country. And to have a conversation about the green belt. The green belt isn't always just the green and pleasant land that we think it is. It's often sometimes run down factories and farming areas that are just derelict and don't look like green belt at all. So you can build on those areas. I think, which is probably the way to go. It's the only way that you're going to get the homes that you need. So I think she would be her classic Angela Rayner, tough-talking northern style that she has, to be able to sort of look her party in the face and say, we're getting on with this issue, we're going to deliver it, don't stand in our way.
So the betting row rumbles on, and I feel it's getting a little bit ridiculous now, because it does seem to be any MP who's ever had a bet now has to fall on their sword. It's all seemingly a bit out of control. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, when you're 20 points behind in the polls and it's a short campaign, every week matters. And having lost a week because of the D-Day commemorations and the Prime Minister leaving early, which he apologised for, we've now had another week where obviously, Conservative Party employees and candidates, one of which was an MP, been betting, and the question about insider trading and whether it was immoral or not has obviously sparked a whole new conversation, and not in a good way for the Conservatives. But it has rumbled on a bit now, it seems, whereby the accusation is that the Prime Minister failed to act against his own either candidates or those within CCHQ, and maybe took too long to withdraw support for them. Sir Keir Starmer acted immediately on an MP, a Labour MP or candidate who bet on himself to lose, I think, which was just extraordinary. And I think, people, it will have less of an impact because obviously the story started under, the Conservatives. But I think if you talk to anyone in a pub, people would be outraged. If you knew that the election was going to be called on the 4th of July and you've had a bet on that, that is simply outrageous and totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
But if you're, a candidate who, you've got to overturn a 23,000 majority or something like that, and you have a bet on yourself to lose. It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
But you do a bit more. I mean, I can see that it's not the same as betting on the election date when you know the election date. But you do know more. If you've knocked loads of doors, or you'd hope you would have knocked loads of doors as a candidate, you would have more of an insight into a seat than your average punter. I mean, I'm surprised that bookmakers are even offering odds on random seats around the country, but clearly they are. And if you suddenly turn up, I mean, Philip Davis, the Tory MP now, is accused of betting £8,000, I think it was, that he wouldn't win his seat. Do you think if you're an average bookmaker and someone comes in and says, I want to place an £8,000 bet on a very specific constituency, you might think, I'm not sure it's the best thing to take this bet or not.
Philip Davis bet on himself to lose in 2005. He was convinced he was going to lose then, but he actually won. So I'm not sure he had any specialist knowledge in that respect, even though he was out knocking the doors. He clearly didn't predict that one. I think it has just kind of got a bit out of control. I mean, Philip Davis is known for liking a flutter, and lots of MPs do like to bet. I think the problem is, like, at the very beginning of this, it did look like insider trading. That is clearly very wrong. But it is degrees of knowledge, isn't it? If you're just an MP who likes a bet, fine. And it does seem to be now anybody who's ever bet on anything political seems to be being hauled over the coals. But, that's very different to if you actually were part of the team that knew the election date.
I mean, I can't, I'm not a gambler, so I don't bet that much. I mean, I'll turn up. But I could have bet, because I was the parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party in 2019 in a place called Halton. The constituency was Halton, which is just outside of Liverpool. So, I mean, that would have been a pretty, dead cert. That I wouldn't have got some really good odds. I could have got some odds that but luckily I didn't win, and I think that's probably lucky for them, lucky for me. But it was a wonderful place, wonderful experience.
And you've been back many times.
I've been through it.
So, what is your moment of the week?
David Tennant and his speech about Kemi Badenoch, and he talked about how he believes she should not exist. Then he clearly realised his mistake, so started backtracking and tried to lessen the impact of that by instead saying that he just wanted her to shut up, which I think actually made it even worse. A very privileged white man telling the only black woman in cabinet to shut up. But also this is just the general tone of this debate is it's often men of the left telling women to shut up. Kemi Badenoch responded on X with a very firm, clear takedown of David Tennant and why it was pretty unpleasant for him to say what he said. And I think many, many women applauded that.
I think there's a problem here. If you are challenging people on the other side of the debate, saying you are disrespectful to people who are trans, that you are using toxic and divisive language, to then use that sort of language yourself, I think you lose all sort of moral authority.
Absolutely. So, John, what's yours?
So my moment of the week was, we have obviously, it's felt like the polls haven't been moving. We've been waiting for, is there going to be a final surprise? Is there going to be something that turns the polls around? And then before the BBC debate, maybe half an hour before, Tory spinners sent round this WhatsApp with a link to a tweet. And the tweet was on the CCHQ press account. And it had the kind of side eyes emoji and then the pig emoji and then stay tuned. And I thought, oh my goodness, is this the moment? And they've got something on Keir Starmer. They've got some amazing material on Keir Starmer that they're going to drop just before the debate. And that will just be it. The whole election will just think that is the moment when the election just went wrong for Keir Starmer. And actually, it just turned out they were rebranding their Twitter account and it was using that piggy bank that they've used in their campaign material, showing that Labour, it's meant to be something to do with the tax, although when you look at the pictures, it's all these people pushing prams and stuff with a massive piggy bank, a red piggy bank. You just think, well, doesn't that suggest that under Labour, in this Labour utopia, people have to save so much money that they need these massive red piggy banks? I think it's meant to be people will need to save money to pay all the tax that Labour put on them. Anyway, I thought it was going to be a big moment. I thought maybe, obviously, we had the history of David Cameron and pigs. I thought, goodness, who knows what's about to come.
Let's not go down that route.
Sadly, it was nothing exciting as that. And Charlie, your moment of the week?
Well, being here is a highlight, which gives you gives you an insight to my diary, which is no. I've had a bull, but I'm here. However, John never nearly made it here this morning. As I was just getting off the train at London Bridge and crossing the road, I bumped into John, and we were having a jolly old conversation down the street. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a scooter came whizzing by and nearly took John out.
I mean, it was a 4-year-old and a little bike, but it was near-death moment. Thank goodness I survived.
I was going to spare the description of the scooter and the rider, but it was on the pavement and it was a 4-year-old. But John, as you can imagine, handled it with such manly-ism.
Thank you.
Well, I think that makes you the hero of the week for saving John's life.
I'm not sure what Charlie did to save me. Anyway, get in touch with us. The podcast will be back on Tuesday next week. See you then.
Bye. Thank you for listening. This is a Reach Studio production hosted by myself, Sam Lister, and John Stevens. Produced and edited by Lydia O'Malley, Shabir Nurzai. Our researcher is Sheila Mahmoodi, and design and art direction by Curtis Phillips Cozier and Luke Stidson. Audio managed by Matt Millard and social content managed by Gully Burrows and Ed Washington. Content production and design overseen by Yara Silver, Harry Dumanel and Spencer Robotham.